The H1B Guy here, and today, the H1B Guy Live, Unedited and Unscripted Q&A 11. But before we get started, I'd like to ask you, if you haven't already, to please subscribe to the H1B Guy channel here on YouTube and like this video so that I can continue to produce more content like this for you. I also wanted to mention the H1B Guy offers a variety of consulting services. I help businesses and individuals solve complex work authorization issues in the recruitment process while bringing awareness to employment-based immigration benefits. A reminder that today's live stream is brought to you by RecruiterNetworks.com, the smart solution for digital perm ads since 2001. Well, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's taken the time here to join today. Please post your questions or comments in the chat, and I will try to get to all of them after I cover kind of the first three topics that I want to go over today. I also wanted to mention that super chats are turned on. If you love what I do here on this channel and you want to support this platform in a greater way, it would be really appreciated. It's hard to believe that this is the first unedited and unscripted Q&A of 2020, or excuse me, of 2021. I am very proud to have launched the Documented Dreamer series live, which our next session will be February 18th at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and the H1B Guy and Friends Live, which was last Wednesday, and our next session for that will be on February 24th at 9 p.m. Eastern. So I just haven't had a chance to do one of these during the normal workday live Q&As, but I've missed you guys. We did a lot of them in December as the year was winding down, and a lot of the news on S386 was just like a roller coaster. So it was a good opportunity for us to get together and kind of vent those things out. Before I get into a couple of the topics that I wanted to cover today, I just wanted to mention there's a lot of updates that have been going on here with the H1B Guy. For those of you who already know, the H1B Guy podcast launched last week, and it should be available across all of your podcast preferred platforms now. The H1B Guy Digest Volume 1 for January 2021 went out on Sunday. So make sure that you've joined the mailing list on the h1bguy.com to receive future H1B Guy Digest. I also had the chance in early January to sit down with my good friend Angela Alberti from the Ivy podcast, and that's going to be airing in March, I think in early mid-March. I'll let you know once the audio and video are released. But I want to put a challenge out there to all of you who watch and support me, and that is I would love to be the most watched episode on their YouTube channel, and I know that you guys can help me accomplish that. So I wanted to jump in today and first start out with the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021 update. You know, we've been talking about this really since right before the inauguration, when the news started leaking out, and we saw the fact sheet on day one. And then, you know, last week or the end of the week prior, Senator Menendez came out and said that he would be calling this bill to the floor in roughly 3 weeks, which by my math gives us about another week and a half here for that to be the case. So a lot of discussion around comprehensive immigration reform, standalone immigration reform. You know, what is this going to look like compared to 2013? What's in it for legal immigrants? What's in it for the undocumented immigrants? So there is a lot of things that are moving right now, a lot of speculation. And, you know, since the rumor started circulating about this bill coming out, and Senator Menendez being named the sponsor, but this being really a President Biden administration driven piece of legislation, we noticed on the fact sheet that a lot of it was surrounding undocumented immigrants, and the little bit that was referred to for the legal immigrants was, you know, H1B dependents would be given work authorization. There was some allusion to clearing the backlog, removing country caps. as well as the PhD rule for those that have earned a PhD here in the U.S. work authorization, and of course the aging out as well. So a lot really going on in terms of legal, documented based immigration. So it'll be very interesting for me, and I still just want to hold judgment and opinion until we see the fine print. And I think a lot of you feel that same way. So hopefully we will get that pretty soon and see what that's going to look like, which leads me into some of the executive actions that were signed by President Biden. Really, I mean, if you look at what he's done since being inaugurated, there's a lot of jokes out there, a lot of memes about President Biden preferring to rule with the pen. But what we've got to understand here is that a total changeover in regime. And I think if you look at the previous administration, they left a lot of things in some pretty bad shape. And a lot of the work that they did was through executive actions and executive orders. So a lot of what's going on right now is time being spent rescinding those. And so yesterday we saw three, different actions really sort of directed towards undocumented border protection, migration from Central and South America. And if you go back to the video that I did on the H1B Guy mulls over the nomination of Alejandro Mayorkas for DHS secretary, his confirmation was announced yesterday, I believe. And as I said back on the mulls over video, is that the reason why you see this nomination is it's a very clear sign of what the 46th president administration is going to prefer as it relates to immigration reform. And that is that they're putting a priority on undocumented. Right or wrong, that's just where their policy is directed. President Biden has been very vocal about his preference to do immigration reform through a congressional approach. So you're talking about judiciary committees, both chambers, and votes. And what's going to be interesting is to see how much of the language from the Fairness for High-Skilled Immigrants Act carries over when we see the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021. But what we also have seen here is that President Biden is willing to use executive actions for immigration. Undocumented or otherwise, he definitely has proven that he's willing to do that. So we'll see if that is something that continues. I will be very interested to see, kind of what is going to continue to happen now. As we talked about with the first 100 days, we've done a lot of speculation on that. I've discussed that a good bit of what the first 100 days would look like. So here we see, a bill released that was a comprehensive immigration reform bill. Here we see several different executive actions targeting undocumented immigrants. We've seen, discussions of within 3 weeks of the comprehensive immigration bill hitting, the Senate. That at least that was mentioned that it would be at least brought out. And so a lot going on in a very short amount of time. But understand, immigration as a whole, a very polarizing subject. And one of the things that I think for me, we think about legal immigration, employment-based immigration, and how important it is for driving technology and innovation for future generations. I mean, it's one of the driving forces to do that. And so we'll continue to monitor, future executive actions here on this channel. Of course, we'll be closely watching U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021. And when it releases, may try to do an impromptu sort of stream to come out and break it down together. But I definitely want to read that in its full context and understand what we are looking to rewrite. So The last thing I wanted to talk about briefly before we get to the Q&A and your comments, and that is this H1B lottery debacle. I will tell you that there are a handful of you that message me on Twitter, email, through my website, and on alternate means that are asking, what is going on with the H1B lottery. And I think that the confusion around that goes back to the regulatory freeze. You look at the time frame around that. I've outlined those dates and timelines. We've talked about the semantics kind of behind what that means. And I broke this down a good bit on the H1B Guy podcast, Immigration Bites episode 1. As I mentioned, that's available on all your favorite podcast platforms now, and you can look that up. It's about 15 minutes. And what I did is I broke down the wage-based selection as well as the wage level increases. Last week we saw where there was, starting this Monday, an open period for comments on extending the wage levels. Not putting it out altogether, it tells me that the current administration definitely is in line with increasing wage levels. In fact, they didn't ask for comments on disputing the wage levels. And so, but I really think that we'll see litigation on that one. But back to the lottery. And that is this. It is February 3rd. March 1st is going to be here before we know it. And I know a lot of the legal experts have come out and said there's no way they're going to implement this for fiscal year 2022. If any of you out there have seen anything that confirms that this is not going to happen from DHS or from USCIS, I'd love to read it and get it out there, because I think what's creating the problem right now is that they made this announcement in early January. The regulatory freeze was announced day one, and the H-1B lottery wage-based selection has been crickets. So again, I think that creates a lot of anxiety, not only for individuals who are going to be beneficiaries, but for the petitioners, for the employers. I mean, they're going through assuming right now that their attorneys are telling them it's random selection. But if you read out there on USCIS website, it talks about wage-based selection. Which one is it? And so I think USCIS and Department of Homeland Security, if anyone from there watches this, my advice is bring some clarity and communicate on what the selection is going to be, so that employers who are petitioning and spending thousands of dollars to obtain H-1B visas through the HCAP lottery will know what the selection process is going to be. But like I said, more of that is available for me on Immigration Bites on the H1B Guy podcast. Again, I wanted to read a 5-star review, my first 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And it just really means so much to me when I get these words of encouragement from all of you, to know that what I'm doing here with this platform is so much bigger than me. And so this says, the truth about legal immigrants. Robert is a true genius and a superhuman being. He's passionate about legal immigration, but not in a way that hurts anyone's sentiments. What I love about him is his firm advocacy for legal immigration with facts and figures without harming any other immigrant communities or efforts. He brings out numbers, stories, and way forward ideas to help those stuck in legal immigration backlogs. I can't thank him enough for these efforts. Please listen to him. Esamir or Esamir, thank you so much. That just is amazing and humbling to me, all in the same breath. And so I'm going to continue to try to put out some really interesting stuff on the podcast. Where it's going to be different is what I'm going to talk about is how issues and news going on in employment-based benefits impact the staff augmentation process. And so that is something that makes me very unique in this whole immigration world, is that I love to talk about STEM, jobs, contingency staffing, perm staffing, and I want to mesh that together on the Immigration Bites episodes for what I do here on this channel, which is bring awareness to employment-based immigration benefits and talk about the latest news in the H-1B visa. So if you haven't had a chance, please check that out. Just really appreciate all of your support here on YouTube, as well as those over 100, 150 that have already listened to the podcast. Just really appreciate it. I just can't do it without your support. And so just going to ask you, if you haven't already, like this video, subscribe to the H1B Guy channel here on YouTube if you haven't already. Just really thankful to be here with you this afternoon. If you have any comments, if you have questions that you want me to cover, now is the time to get those in the comments in the chat, because I'm going to start getting to those here in a few minutes. I also wanted to just mention super chats are turned on. If you love what I do here on this channel and you want to support this platform, it's greatly appreciated. But really, if you just like and subscribe, that's really all that I can ask of you. Just again, really looking forward to what is in store in the immigration world for 2021. I think if I'm reading between the tea leaves, reform is coming. It's just going to be a matter of how quickly it's going to happen. And for those of you that are stuck in the backlog, 1.2 million and growing, it just can't come soon enough. For those of you that are documented dreamers that are facing the reality of aging out, this reform cannot come soon enough. And so we're going to keep talking about it. We're going to keep advocating for it. And we're going to keep bringing clarity. We're going to talk about both sides. And no one is outside of our target if they aren't doing what we think needs to be done. So wanted to bring up the first chat that I have. Sanasith says, if the new H-1B rule does stay, is it a lack of time or lack of intent to stop the rule? Very problematic if the wage level rule this year, but they take it back later and it's random lottery next year. Yeah, I think that's it, right? I mean, you look at what is the clarity around the wage-based selection for the lottery, right? And I think, go back to the timeline, November 2nd, and then there was a comments period through early December, the cooling off period, and then, January 6th, 7th, 8th, right after the new year, this came out. And so, I think that it's really interesting that there's been nothing on this, right? I mean, no update. Unless you have heard otherwise. I mean, again, I've seen the legal experts out there that came out and said day one there wouldn't be a change for this fiscal year. But what I found is that all of the other midnight regulations under this regulatory freeze have come out. I mean, you go back and you look at very quickly, the Department of Labor came out within a matter of a day or two and said that, the LCA rule was going to be rescinded immediately. And it wasn't until back on the 27th of last week that they came out, DOL came out with the wage rule. And so, again, I think the quietness of all of this is what makes this problematic. You look at the timelines of it. We're talking about electronic filings, right? March 1st through March 20th for the second time. And I've talked about how important electronic filings are in the scheme of H-1B reform and in the selection process. I did a whole video on, USCIS implementing wage-based selection for the lottery, where, I talk about why I approve of it, why I think it's a good thing, and why a lot of you who are on H-1B visa agree with me. But then there are definitely the detractors on it that say, well, ultimately that will put those visas in the hands of more big tech, the Facebooks, the Googles, the Amazons of the world. But I would say if it's getting it out of the hands of some of these integrators that have come in and are undercutting, contract-based staffing, bulk staffing, then that isn't necessarily a bad thing either. What to me the wage-based selection does is it immediately ends the cheap labor debate. Gone are any level one or level twos. And I know a lot of you out there are saying, well, how can a student who only has 3 years of experience be selected based on wage? And I think that is the to be determined on this, right? I mean, I think ultimately there are a lot of negative connotations out there towards the OPT pipeline and what it creates. But for me, I think we need to incentivize advanced U.S. master's degrees that are earned in the STEM fields. And so that's where it gets tricky, right? Is how do you incentivize somebody who has, a U.S. master's and roughly 3 years of experience? How are they going to compete with somebody who maybe a U.S. master's and 5 or 6 years of experience in a completely different field that's commanding top dollar? And so I think that becomes what the problem and the unknown is, and why there needs to be a lot of research around it. But thank you for your question. I hope that I answered it. But I think, again, the thing that's debatable right now is that if you go back and look at what's published on the Federal Register, it says March 9th, right? And so the question becomes, how can something that opens for electronic filings on March 1st, but yet the rule isn't effective until March 9th? Now, you could also say that means that March 9th to March 20th, right, which is 11 days, more days after it's effective, would it be open than before it's effective? Would it be open, right? Does that make sense to anybody? So I'm talking about, if you're talking about March 1st, effective March 9th, that's 8 days versus March 9th to March 20th. So, hey, Maddie, thank you so much, man. Appreciate you jumping in the stream. And of course, appreciate you jumping on last Wednesday. As I've said, I really want you to be a regular on the H1B Guy and Friends Live. And actually, I'm glad you jumped in, because it reminds me, yesterday, I put out on the podcast the very first Stamp It Out Q&A that I did with Maddie and his better half, Shakti. And wow, what a great listen it is. For those of you who maybe prefer more of the audio format for longer form interviews, just a lot of things that he and I talked about. Gosh, that was back in early August, where, I was saying that I didn't think S386 was going to pass even back then. Not that I like being right about that, but it just, again, when you start looking at all the amendments that are associated and everything that, started to be piled onto that, right? It didn't look good. The holdouts on UC from Senator Durbin, who now is going to be the chair of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. But thank you, Maddie. Appreciate you jumping in. Again, for those of you out there, if you have any questions, I only have a couple more. Please post those in the chat. I'll bring them up. Any comments that you wanted to talk about, any feedback that you have for me here on this channel, any topics that you would like me to cover. I've got a few things that I'm also planning outside of some of the other live streams that we're doing. I've been working on a very big piece around EB1C category. I haven't put it all together and filmed it and edited it yet, but that should be something that should be out in the next couple of weeks. The other thing I wanted to mention, but I didn't list it out, is the denial rates. I don't know if you guys saw some of the data that was out there on the denial rates, and I think I may cover that a little bit more on Friday in the H1B Guy News for the week ending February 5th. but the denial rates were down significantly. I haven't looked at all of the numbers, but I think it's got to be due to the fact that fewer cases were petitioned. But I could be wrong. I don't know if anyone else has seen those numbers, but I think historically speaking, denials have been pretty consistent. So it'll be interesting to see when we start looking at data towards the summer, July, and then past that. So Q3, Q4 for the government's fiscal year 2022, that'll be data that I'll be really interested to see. I'm interested to see a couple things. That's denial rates. I'm also really interested to see the I-140 approval numbers over the next 6 months or so and what those look like over the last year. Because it feels like to me, and I know this is one of my predictions where I said, roughly 200,000 H-1Bs will be petitioned in the lottery this year, which last year was 275,000. So I feel like there's going to be a reduction there. It feels like there could be a reduction in some of the perm labor filings. But what I'm hearing from a lot of my contacts, though, is that thawing of the ice has started. They're seeing a lot more perm labor start to build itself back up. So these are individuals that their employers are sponsoring for green card sponsorship and employment-based preferences. So it seems like there is starting to be some growth there. So again, if you haven't, please like this video. It helps with promoting the live stream out on YouTube. I just want to thank you for everyone who's taken the time here to join in this afternoon. Really great to be back with all of you. We definitely have a lot to talk about, right? I mean, it's very clear there is a lot that is going on in the world of immigration for employment-based benefits here in the U.S. I really believe that, as my friend Richard Allman says, we're seeing a thawing of the ice. We're seeing kind of a lifting of that. But what I want to warn you is that you're also seeing the trend towards big tech. And what is that impact, right? I think a lot of what I talk about here is that tech startups and how important they are. Those small VC funded startups, right? Those are some of the coolest companies to work for because it's all new. Frontier type territory. So, but anyway, hey, Ram, nice to see you. Thanks for jumping in here today. Really appreciate it. Thanks for doing this. Why do we have an EB backlog? Why rulemakers did not think about this problem when the rules were first drafted in the 90s? Why are rulemakers hesitant to reform now? I mean, I think that for me, there's several reasons. Of course, why do we have an EB backlog? Well, it goes back to there is a 7% cap on country of birth. And when you look at how the H-1B visa has been set up, you're talking about 70% of H-1B visas are individuals from India. And H-1B visas are considered to be dual intent, albeit temporary work visas that max out after 6 years, but can be extended with an approved I-140. So naturally what it's created is this sort of perfect storm, right? This very long line of folks from India who have been here on an H-1B for several years, who have an employer who sponsors them through perm labor. They get to an I-140, and then they're just in that extension H-1B cycle, right? Where you're constantly extending your H-1B, whether you're a perm employee or you're a consultant who moves from end client to end client. Now, why did the rule makers not think about this problem when the rules were first drafted in the 1990s? Well, no offense to Senator Kennedy. He was the sponsor, of that act, and from 1990, it was actually 89 and signed into law in 90. But I don't think that they could foresee how quickly technology was going to drive and influence staffing and hiring needs. I've got a couple things that I've been working on for the podcast again that are just a little different than what a lot of what I do here on this channel is. And a lot of it is talking about how the jobs have moved. And technology is driving that. Automation, agility is driving this redundancy in a lot of jobs, but new jobs are being created every day because of that innovation. And so I just think that they didn't foresee the demand and the way that we would grow. And of course, again, there was a lot of the abuse that happened, right? The undercutting of American workers. Cutting back on staffing needs for integrator based needs, but I just think that it was a perfect storm that unfortunately technology and the information that was out there for Senator Kennedy at the time and those lawmakers that approved this. I just think that they just didn't know that this was going to create the problem that it's created. Why are rulemakers hesitant to reform now? I mean, I think you talk about any change in a law, there's going to be hesitancy, but specifically when you're talking about temporary work visas and you're talking about green cards, those are two very political and polarizing topics, right? So I think that's why you see some hesitancy, but really, why are they hesitant? This is the one reason. They're uneducated on it. They don't understand that there are kids that are aging out every week that have been here for 20 years, like my friend Summer, who was on the Documented Dreamer series. She came when she was 2. She's now 21 and on an F1. She plays college soccer. Her entire life was spent here in America. That's all she knows. She is an American, but yet she's aged out. And that's because her parents came here on an E-2 treaty visa. They're investors running a business, and they're punished for making that choice to provide a better life for their child and for themselves because of it. And so I think that it's just an unknown, Rom. They just don't really fully understand it. Well, that's changing because it is front and center because of the advocacy that's been going on now for the last few years. That's rapidly changing. But I think it's just an out of sight, out of mind, and just kind of uneducated on it. So, Rom, good to see you, man. Thanks. Really appreciate you joining here. Hey, Ravi. Yeah, so I covered this earlier, and I feel like I'm the only person out here that's saying that this could still be a possibility. And I'm okay if I'm wrong on it because all of the legal experts are using words like should and shouldn't and most likely. Those are semantic words, right? I'm okay if I'm wrong on this, meaning I think that they put this in play. They announced it January 8th. They've been crickets. They, meaning USCIS, have been crickets on this since Inauguration Day when the regulatory freeze was put into play. Now, with that being said, something could change this afternoon. We could get an update or a memo today or tomorrow. But for right now, I sure feel like that this is still in play right now. And I think that that's what sucks, is that it's created this limbo for beneficiaries and petitioners. This whole unknown, because right now, if I'm a beneficiary and I'm working under the assumption that this is going to be random selection, but yet it turns out to be wage-based, and I'm only being paid $77K when they probably could pay me $85, and that would get me to the threshold of selection, there's a problem. But again, it goes back to, what's the value in the market behind that? And so my answer to you is that I don't know. I wish I knew. It's very confusing. It's very unfortunate. And quite honestly, it's pretty poor showing from DHS and USCIS to not communicate what they're going to do when we are literally less than a month away now from this portal opening up for electronic filings. And so, Ravi, thanks for jumping in. Thanks for your question. I think you've got one more below, and I'll pull that up after I pull this one up. Thank you. Thanks for joining the stream. I mean, I can't do this without your support, Sanith. And I just you engaging here. One of the things that I love that we've created here is this community in the comments section, where questions can be posted and answered by others that are participating in the chat. It just really is so cool to see how this has evolved over time. And again, I just can't do it without you. So thank you. Will wage-based rule be used this year for H1B? If it is used, then will all the allocated H1B visas be from L4, L3 level salary only? Yeah, I mean, I hit on this earlier, Ravi. I think you probably jumped in a little bit late. So what I said is I just don't see where there is going to be a level 1 or level 2 selected if we're talking about wage-based selection. There could be, but it goes back to what is wage-based selection, and we clearly define that. And I think the reason why there is a part of me that still thinks that this is in play is there's two reasons. The first is how quiet they've been on it. When, like I said, when DOL came out and announced the LCA, the dual LCA and the dual petition, when they announced that was gone, and then they came out and said, listen, we need comments for extending the wage level until May, the effective date until May, but it's still going to start July 1st. So the wage level really hasn't changed completely in terms of what the wage levels are. But I will tell you, even if I think they want to pursue this, the wage levels, still think you're going to see challenges in court, litigation in court against those wage level increases. I think they still have overshot what those percentages should be. But I think that there is a possibility, again, for this wage base to still happen, because let's think about what electronic filing is. And electronic filing basically, to me, means that they would be putting in what the annual salary of that individual would be. And that should be pretty easy to select the top 65,000, the top 20,000, right? Or the top 20,000 first, and then the top 65,000 in the second bucket. I think it would be pretty easy. I mean, you're talking about just keying in a field, a salary number, right? And then that's validated by offer letters and above the prevailing wage determination, of course. But I think it could be pretty easy for them to do that. A lot of folks don't seem to feel that way. The legal experts out there definitely disagree with me. And I will be the first to admit that, hey, I was wrong. But I'm going to continue to hold it. I still think that this is going to happen until they announce something, like I said, could be as soon as this afternoon. I'm making that up, but literally at any moment we could see an update. There wouldn't be an EB backlog only if magically H1Bs were uniformly distributed among all nationalities. Who would have thought a developing country with 1.3 billion might be overly represented? Comment 2. EB backlog won't go away even with new H1B rules. No matter how you slice it, there will be people from one country who take most work visas anyway, maybe slightly lower proportion. Yeah, I mean, that I think what you're alluding to here, and a lot of people talk about, is if you're going to cap employment-based preferences for green cards at 7%, then the same cap should be in place for the H-1B visa. And again, you look at the numbers, and I get 70% are from India. I believe about 20% from China. So you're really talking about rest of the world holds 10% of H-1B visas for the most part. Excuse me. What's interesting about that is recently I've been coming in contact with a lot of people that are on H-1B that aren't from China or India. So, but those numbers are documented. And so I think what you're getting at here with this is that, one, there wouldn't be an employment-based backlog if 70% of H-1B visas weren't issued to individuals from India. But there also wouldn't be a backlog if there wasn't a quota on caps as well. I don't believe the backlog would be as high if it were a first come, first served system. And so to me, that's fairness. That's equality. First come, first serve. I'm not discriminating you based on your country of birth. I don't care whether you're from Costa Rica, South Africa, or Japan. If you have merit and skill, then I think you should be awarded on that. And again, this is where I go back to a merit-based immigration point system where there are visas, work authorization visas issued for dependents, spouses, and children of legal working age. For initial beneficiaries, we're talking about an EAD. I've called it an H1B EAD that would be issued on merit. And so I think that to me is what solves a lot of the problems. And unfortunately, I don't see that being a possibility anytime in the next 3-4 years. But I am definitely going to continue my work on advocating for a merit-based system, as I think that just alleviates a lot of the issues that have been created by 140,000 green cards only issued for employment-based preferences, 7% caps on country of birth. And then you go look at the pipelines. 70% H1Bs are from India, 18%, 20% from China. It naturally creates the backlog. Hey, how are you? Tahina, nice to meet you. Thanks for jumping in here. When will they start H4 EAD premium processing? Boy, that seems to be the $1,000,000 question. I did see where they had come back and said that they were going to reduce the fee, or that the fee was going to be less than I had originally assumed. You know, my understanding on this EAD backlog that's been created, specifically Louisville, Texas, Phoenix, Arizona, is a lot of it's been about the biometrics appointments. But as I've alluded to dozens of times now here on this channel, I'm aware of folks that have been waiting since last February for their H4 EAD, and several that have been out of work now. It's really unfortunate. We've got to get the processing up to speed. This situation, you know, could be alleviated through premium processing. But as we've talked about, one of the things that we need to understand is that the government uses contractors to process a lot of these cases, a lot of the petitions. And so your case is probably sitting in a stack, right? Like several others where there's no receipt notice, the check hasn't been cashed. And honestly, that's no different than the F1 OPT issue and the OPT delays that are going on there, where kids are getting ready to graduate and they've been waiting for a receipt notice since October or November. The thing I will tell you about premium processing, whether it's H4, I-140, H1B, premium processing is USCIS's #1 revenue generating source. #1. And so if they can expand their service offering here, I think they will. I think unfortunately right now they just don't have the human capital, the manpower to offer premium processing, collect the fee without being able to fulfill the turnaround time. And so I think that's why you see premium processing just still isn't still is option. Sorry, froze there for a second. But Tuhina, thank you for jumping in. Nice to see you, and really appreciate it. If you have any more questions or comments, I definitely would like to get to them. That's all that I had right now. So if you're still watching this live stream, and I ask you to please like this video, subscribe to the H1B Guy channel here on YouTube. Have a few more minutes that I'd love to do a couple of more questions or comments from you guys. I did want to mention, I had a good friend of mine reach out to me telling me about a problem, somebody who working for them on an H1B and considering moving to Canada. And it wasn't because of their H1B. It wasn't because of the climate here in the US. It's because their spouse, who's been on a CPT for several years, has been in the lottery multiple times and not been selected. And so CPT, curriculum practical training, which means that they are in school part-time and can work part-time, either getting a master's or a higher PhD type degree. So they have to maintain tuition, right, in order to maintain work authorization. And so unfortunately for this individual, the lottery hasn't been good to them, and they haven't been sponsored. Their perm labor hasn't been sponsored by their current employer, so they don't have an approved I-140 and can't even file for an H-4EAD. So they're considering making a jump. But, just hate to hear stories like that, but they're out there, right? You get fed up with the lottery, and I have to go back and wonder if that person who is on CPT, who has probably a unique skill set, if they could find a job that paid them 85 to 120K salary, let's say, pretty broad range. But I think that 80K is the number for this wage-based selection in the lottery. I think you have to be above that if you're going to have a fighting chance. So, hey, Richard, how you doing, man? Hola. Richard is a friend of mine from Belize, and Richard and I chat on Instagram. He is very interested in the H2 ban specifically for Belize. And so I've been helping him keep an eye on this and monitor that. He's just been hoping that that there's an executive action or an announcement from the current administration that lifts that ban from Belize. But Richard, man, thanks for jumping in. Unfortunately, no updates. Here's your question. Any update on H2B? Would we really like if you have any information on Belize? Yeah, it's just no information out there, Richard, unfortunately. No changes from the information you've provided. And of course, I'll continue to monitor it for you. But here's somebody, again, wants to come here, wants to work on a work visa here in the U.S., but is unfortunately banned from doing so because of country of birth. So, hey, my music love. Yeah, I actually on Monday released the H1B Guy forecast, March 2021 visa bulletin, employment-based predictions. I shot that on the new cam. Hope you guys like this new cam. It seems like the frame rate and the quality and the lighting is much better. And I can't do this without your guys' support. I mean, the folks who set up one-on-ones with me, my clients who are using me to help them solve their work authorization issues, is helping this platform grow slowly and organically and continue to upgrade the technology that I have. I'd love to upgrade more, but hey, baby steps. So my music love, check out that video. It posted on Monday, the H1B Guy forecast, March 2021 visa bulletin, employment-based predictions. I was pretty conservative this month because, as we saw on February's bulletin, the Department of State gave us some insight as to what we should expect for forward movement for March, and it wasn't a whole lot. So, hey, Sandeep, do you know if Joe Biden is going to focus on making USCIS more efficient in light of its impact on both legal and undocumented immigrants? Yeah, I think that, listen, that's the one thing about Secretary Ali Mayorkas is that he's worked for USCIS. He's been an associate director. He understands what needs to happen in terms of processing. But if you look at a lot of the messaging that's gone on from USCIS, a lot of it has been blame COVID for their processing issues. And so how long are they going to continue to use that excuse for Louisville, Texas, which Texas is pretty open and pretty free right now? And so I think that, again, yeah, we hope President Biden is going to leverage Ali Mayorkas's experience in USCIS to make them more efficient in light of its impact on both their legal and undocumented. Electronic filings are huge, right? Because what it does is it saves time and money and manpower. And so we'll see if my prediction is correct by the end of the year, if we'll have uniform electronic filings across the board. That may be a little aggressive, but still a possibility. So, Sandeep, thanks for jumping in. Appreciate your question. Again, thanks for joining me this afternoon. Hey, Tuhina, again, thank you for addressing it. Do you suggest to go to India for stamping instead of waiting in U.S.? Spouse changed employer and has valid visa till 2023, but employer didn't file for my H4. Okay, so you don't have your H4 dependent visa. Your H4 dependent visa has expired. What I would advise you to do is have your spouse ask if he can reach out to the immigration attorney for his current employer and pay for them to process your H4 directly, meaning he's just going to pay out of pocket for you to process the H4 dependent. Now, if you're wanting to file the H4 EAD, same applies, right? The I-765 for the H4 EAD, same applies. Your spouse has the rights to reach out to ask if he can utilize the current attorney of his employer and enter into an agreement with them and pay for the fees directly. Or if he doesn't want to do that and you need an immigration attorney, let me know. I have a couple that I can refer to you. You can just reach out to me through my website if that's something that that you think you may need. But I think the easiest approach, if I'm advising you here, is have your spouse go to the attorney of his employer and enter into a individual agreement with them to file either your just H4 dependent on your own or your H4 EAD. Now, I would not advise you to leave the country, and I would not advise you to leave the country until the consulates are open and processing visas again. Otherwise, if you do need to leave the country and you don't have a stamp, you need to plan on not returning for a long time. And by a long time, I mean 3 months, 6 months, a year, maybe longer. Things are not normal right now for travel internationally. President Biden put out the new travel ban that went into play last Tuesday. South Africa, the UK, some other countries around that. And so if you need to travel, you're going to be traveling with a lot of risk. So I would stay here for as long as you could. Hey, Sandy, absolutely. I hope it helped, right? I think that, ultimately there's a lot of hope right now in positive reform from the current administration, but they got left a pretty big mess. I'm going to give them some benefit of the doubt, but I am going to call them to the carpet on this H1B wage selection for the H1B lottery for fiscal year 2022. We've got to get some clarity and communication on that. But the hope is that once Secretary Mayorkas gets in, then, ultimately, it's going to take some time. He's going to have to get some of his people in, and you'll start to see, I think, some improvement. Hopefully we see electronic filing, and that'll help things improve significantly. I was asking for the option to expedite the H4 stamping so that I can file EAD. I did get an appointment, but not really sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess you're asking to get an H4 stamped. Ultimately, I think it's just a matter of how bad do you want to leave the country with the risk of not being able to get back in versus leaving the country without the possibility of getting back in. It's two different things, right? What I mean by that is that if you're going to go unstamped, you have an expired I-94. If you leave the country, that is going to be something that has to happen for you to get back in whenever that is, right? You know that. But if you have a stamp right now, you have an appointment at a consulate that's outside of the country, assuming in India somewhere, I think you're still running the risk. I know I'm on a couple groups where there are some appointments that are happening, but listen, I think that the only thing that I want to warn you on is just the risk of leaving the country right now. And that's it. you could very well have no problems, right? You could go and there could not be any issues at all. But I'm always going to advise you to stay unless you absolutely need to leave, especially when it comes to what's going on right now. And even before that, I would advise on, hey, is this travel absolutely necessary? Going through the consulate process to get those stamps can create issues. I know handfuls of people that had very tight cases, had approvals for years, same employers for years, and 221Gs were selected. And this was over the last 3-4 years that really picked up. Chennai being probably the worst. So I hope that answered your question. If it didn't, I have a few more minutes. So let me know. Okay, so you've got I-94 till September of 2021. Again, I think it's my opinion, right? You're asking for an opinion, an advice. I'd sit tight, and unless you absolutely are like, I need to have that freedom, then go for it. But again, I would sit tight. You've got 9 months roughly for your current I-94, and your I-94 can expire as long as you've been issued a new visa, whatever that is. If it's the H-4 EAD, that receipt or that approval number kind of it serves as the new record until you enter or exit the country again. So I hope that helps you. Definitely really confusing, definitely stressful. I'm sure you have family that you'd love to see that you haven't, and I wish you good luck. Heard rumors that H1B wage-based rule will be effect this year. USCIS has apparently made changes to the registration portal and I-129 forms that include wage levels and submitted to OMB. Chetan, good to see you, man. Appreciate you reaching out. Again, as I said earlier, I don't know if you were on, but I'm going to hold to I think this is still going to happen. And if I'm wrong, I'll admit it. No one else is saying this. And the legal experts are saying it should, and shouldn't, and a lot of semantics involved. I go back to 2 signs. One, there's been no communication on this since the transition when the regulatory freeze was announced. 2, as you said, pretty easy to make changes to the registration portal and have selection process be based on who's paid the most. Even if I have 200,000 applications, I think I could probably sort through that data pretty quickly if one of the fields of entry is your annual salary. I could be wrong on that, but it seems pretty black and white to me. But I think what you have, though, at play, and why a lot of folks don't feel that way, is that you have an effective date of March the 9th, right? And the portal opens on March 1st. So how can we say that isn't effective till March 9th, but the portal opens on March 1st? I mean, it's the who moved my cheese, right? I mean, I think that's the which one is it, the chicken or the egg? Can we have multiple direct employers file multiple H-1Bs, hopefully increasing chances of selection? Yes. This is how the integrators have gamed the system for years. Okay. Why would you not increase your odds if you are an OPT EAD STEM and you have 2 or 3 employers that want to hire you as a big data developer and pay you $95,000? Guess what? If 2 or 3 get selected, you, Chetan, get to choose who you want to work for. It's the one time you actually have some authority and power in the H-1B process. So something to think about. Yes, you can. I think, though, that what you've got to be careful of is the salary number, right? I wouldn't have one employer put me in at 75 and one employer put me in at 95. I just wouldn't do that. I'd try to make sure that the numbers were pretty equal. So don't accept a salary or don't accept to be petitioned if those numbers aren't pretty comparable. It's just my advice. I don't know if that will change or do anything different, but just my advice. So, yep, got you for the H-1B cap lottery. I think that I covered that pretty good, Chetan, man. Thanks for jumping in. Good to see you this afternoon. Tahina, absolutely. I hope I answered your question. A lot of confusion right now. Travel creates a lot of anxiety. This goes back to why I'm such a big proponent of, the H1B EAD, or, the EAD with AP rights, right? So that there's the freedom to choose who your employer is. There's the freedom to choose your salary. There's the freedom for you to travel. But the pandemic has changed a lot of things, and that is how we travel and how we travel internationally. As we talked about last Wednesday on the H1B Guy Live, the H1B Guy and Friends Live, I think that the thing will be global travel will pick back up when we start to see, a pretty significant portion of the world population is vaccinated and can produce the QR code on their Apple Watch or on their phone, or have just a plastic card, right? So yeah, I think that that's it, right? And I know for me, I had some hesitation personally on getting vaccinated, but when I talked to Dr. Raj Karnatak, and he helped me understand the technology behind it and the reasoning behind it, the science behind it. I just think about it. For me, it's not about me doing my part for myself, but it's for me and everyone else, right? And so it's the same reason why I wear a mask indoors in public. I know a lot of people, aren't necessarily proponents of the mask, but for me, am going to choose to be cautious indoors specifically. I'm definitely much more comfortable outdoors, but even when there's a lot of people outdoors, I think there are times where you've got to be overly cautious. And so, listen, the pandemic is driving everything we talk about, right? It's driving stimulus, it's driving jobs reports, it's driving the market, it's driving our day-to-day lives. And so, that's why, for me, fortunately, I get to do this. I get to be the H1B guy because of the pandemic. I probably would have never made this career pivot that I've made, career shift that I've made, if it wasn't for it, because I was making a lot of money and I had a lot of people working for me and I was doing very well. But I decided to pursue this crazy passion and idea, and I realized that I have a very niche skill set and that people love hearing me talk about immigration. And can I tell you something? I love talking about employment-based immigration here in the US. I just do. And so I think that is why so many of you are attracted to this channel, and you're attracted to me, and I appreciate your support and interaction. And so that's going to wrap up the Q&A for today. I'm just going to ask you one more time to please like this video, subscribe to the H1B Guy channel here on YouTube, and click the bell for notifications if you haven't already, so that you're notified anytime we go live or we post new content to this channel. A reminder that today's stream was brought to you by RecruiterNetworks.com, the smart solution for digital perm ads since 2001. This national job board network provides recruitment websites in 1,024 major U.S. metro areas. Each local job board is its own portal and is a low-cost resource for immigration recruitment ads for all industries and professions, with a flat price of $225 per ad, regardless of which city you choose. RecruiterNetworks.com has been the #1 place for immigration attorneys, immigration ad agencies, and employers to meet the DOL requirements for the digital portion of the perm advertisement rules. RecruiterNetworks.com. Tell them the H1B guy sent you. One last time, please like this video, subscribe to the H1B Guy channel here on YouTube, click the bell for notifications, and go listen to the H1B Guy podcast on your preferred platform. Immigration Bites 1, where I chew on the latest in employment-based immigration and its impact on the staff augmentation process. If you made it this far, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to watch my stream and watch my content. I really appreciate your support. The H1B Guy, your global source for all things